Hello, I'm Gill Fielding, and this is what's caught my eye in the media this week. Now, I've decided that the posh people must be feeling the pinch because I read this week that Ocado analysed their average order, and their average order has gone down from £138 in 2021 to £120 now. Now, bearing in mind that £138 will have had an increase just from inflation over the year, that's probably worth about £150 now. And the average Ocado customer is spending over only 120. So they've cut back by about £30 per order. So it just goes to show that the posh are feeling the pinch just as much as anyone else. And there's lots of things that we can do about that. And one tip that I'd like to offer to everybody, which I'm currently doing, is I extend my shopping period by a day each time. So whereas normally I would just go shopping, say, on a Saturday and just throw everything into the basket, I now don't go the Saturday following, I go the Sunday following. And gradually what you do is you move your shopping period out longer and longer. So actually, I'm nearly at a fortnight now between shopping trips. It means that you have to plan better and do things slightly different. But I am shopping better than I was and spending less than I was. And maybe that's a lesson that the Ocado customers have learned as well. And it just goes to show that all of these things need to be done, whether you shop at Ocado or via Ocado or Waitrose or Marks and Spencer's or whatever, right the way down to the cheapest discount type of store. All of these things matter, and you need to be cutting back on the costs, and the posh feel the pinch just as much as anyone else. Now, I often talk about the government's failure to build 300,000 properties per year, which has been their stated objective since I was a kid, so for decades. It's been the stated objection of every government, whatever their political persuasion, and they never do it. And we know they never do it. And I don't know why they even bother to say that they are going to do it, because they don't ever do it. But I was looking into this in a bit more detail this week, and it turns out in the past year, there have been 307,000 planning permissions granted. So actually more than the 300,000 that the government keep whittering about. But of those 307,000 planning permissions, only 172,930 homes were started, and only 171,630 were finished. So about 45% of all planning permissions fall by the wayside. And of course, it's easy to say, oh, that's land banking by the builders and so on, but I don't think it is just that. And I think what happens with the larger builders, they will only build and sell properties at the rate at which they can maintain their sales and their profit. So if they suddenly built all of the planning permissions that they had, it would flood the market and prices would soften. And obviously the builders don't want that. They want to maintain their sales and their profit. So they build at a rate at which that sales and profit are maintained, and no quicker. And interestingly, what these larger builders do, they tend to all build what I call identikit houses. And we've all seen them, haven't we? They're these little enclaves of modern box type houses. And of course, all major developers build the same sort of things. So when a builder is looking at whether to build or release properties onto the market, they've also got to look at what the other developers are doing, because obviously if they're trying to sell when another developer is trying to sell their development, there's obviously twice as much supply in the marketplace, and prices might soften. Not necessarily, but they might do. So builders will only build at the rate at which their profit and their sales can be maintained, and no quicker, no matter whatever the government says. So honestly, the government setting these targets is a ridiculous thing, because it's not in their control, it's in the builder's control. But what this does for us as property investors, it gives us a huge opportunity. Because the builders don't build at the rate at which they could, it means that demand is always higher than supply, and it means that prices constantly rise. And for us as developers, as small developers, we're building on often converting in ones and twos. And you can release ones and twos onto the market. It doesn't impact any price whatsoever. The other thing that we do as property investors, we tend to build a variety of properties. So we might be converting a shop into a flat or something like that, or a house into 2 or 3 flats, something like that. So we're not all building the same sort of property like the large builders are. And again, that means that we can build, and we're providing a variety. And it means that the people that don't want a modern box looking thing on a little enclave might look at one of our properties. So actually the current situation, as much as I moan about it constantly, is very good for property investors, because the way the builders control the flow keeps the prices up, and we've got the head on building stuff that's different and small and only small numbers, and that keeps us ahead of the builders. So although I might moan about it, I think it's a pretty good situation for us as small developers and investors, and long may it continue. Now, another topic that I address quite regularly is about the beliefs and behaviours and attitudes of rich people versus so-called poor people. And one of the big differences between those two is the fact that rich people understand investing and poor people understand saving. And you will never get rich by saving, you will only ever get rich by investing. And it turns out that the gap between the top percentages of people in the UK and the bottom percentages of the people in the UK gets wider and wider every year. So the rich constantly get richer in every circumstance, and the poor will always get poorer. And this is an indication of a free capitalist society. There can never be levelling up financially. So why a government ever talks about it, I don't know, unless you're going to completely turn into a communist society, which obviously we're not and wouldn't do. There will always be this massive disparity between the rich and the poor. But interestingly, the rich always get richer. So in 2006, the top 10% of people owned an average of £900,000 more than the people in the middle, not at the bottom, the people in the middle. So they owned £900,000 per person more than people in the middle. And now we've just discovered that those top 10% of people now own 1.2 million more than the people in the middle. So the difference has got bigger in the last 15 years or so. And of course, there's obvious reasons for that. First and foremost, the rich tend to own stuff. So they own properties, they own businesses, they own art, they own different stuff, they own shares. And of course, those things tend to rise in value. Their investments, they will rise by an average of 10% per year, compared to savings, which is about 1%. So obviously the rich benefit from that. But more importantly than that, the rich have got beliefs and behaviours and attitudes about money that the poor don't. So, for example, over that 15 years we've just talked about, there's been a recession, there's been a credit crunch, we've had COVID, we've had Brexit, and still the difference has got wider. So it seems that in difficult times, the gap widens even more. And that's because poor people in difficult times are more fearful and are much more likely to hide their money in a sock under the bed, and rich people just carry on doing what they've always done because they have self-responsibility, self-awareness, they have immunity from government control, and they keep doing their own thing. The poor people, unfortunately, are at the control of the government, and we all know where that leads to. So there's a big lesson to be learnt there. Rich people have a belief in themselves and a belief in money and how money works that continues irrespective of the circumstances of the national economy and the outside world. And that gives them self-reliance and gives them a sense of immunity. Now, the good thing for people who may not be in the top 10% of the wealthy people in this country is that you can learn those behaviours. You can adopt those beliefs. You can take on those attitudes and do what rich people do. So that's the wonderful thing about living in a society like ours. You may be at the bottom, but you don't have to stay there, because there's huge amounts of opportunity for you to move up and down our society, because we have complete freedom to do so. And no amount of supposed levelling up is going to change that. It's interesting, when times get tough, the poor make through fear, make the worst possible decisions, which is to do nothing or to hide. And in difficult circumstances, the rich just carry on doing what they've always done, which is investing in assets which grow at least 10% per year. So you can learn it, doesn't matter where you are now. I mean, I'm a living example of that, born with nothing and now have something. And we can all learn those lessons. Doesn't matter where you start, it's where you're going to that's important. So get learning those wealth lessons, and you can eventually get into the top 10% of people in our society if you choose to. Well, I hope you found that interesting. Keep safe, and I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.